As for New York's other football team moving over to the 3-8 Jets, who are on their bye, but like the Giants, there's no shortage of storylines to talk about. Joining me now is senior writer for The Athletic, Zach Rosenblatt, who covers the Jets. Zach, earlier this week, you and Diana Russini delved into the disaster that is the Jets organization right now, including the firing of GM Joe Douglas. Now, Zach, if Woody Johnson had such little confidence in Douglas, why didn't he make this move sooner?
Well, I think he had confidence in Douglas. You know, if you remember, after he fired Robert Saleh, he said, "This is the most talented roster I've had in my 25 years as the Jets owner." And you'd think that would mean that he was high on the job that Joe Douglas did. But ultimately, 6 years in, not even close to the playoffs, I think they fired him at this point in the season because they figured they could start the search for a new one, and they didn't want to do that while he was in the building. They felt like that was awkward, so they decided to pull the plug now.
How will this impact both the GM and coaching search moving forward?
Yeah, like I said, it lets them start the GM search a little earlier. I think the goal is to hire a GM first and then the head coach, depending on who the head coach is, I guess. But, yeah, so this lets them get the GM first, and then ideally Woody Johnson is letting the GM hire the coach, but he likes to get involved in a lot of things the Jets do, so it's unclear if he'll actually give full power to the GM.
And that coaching position, Rex Ryan this week was not shy about wanting to coach Gang Green again. How real of a possibility is that?
I mean, it's pretty ridiculous that it's being talked about as much as it is, although that's Rex Ryan doing a lot of the talking. But I would say that that's like only an option if all of their top targets fall by the wayside. They reject the Jets, they aren't able to reel anybody in, and they have no other options. That's the only reason I could see them going to a coach who hasn't coached in just about a decade, and at the end of his Jets tenure was not very good.
Now, Zach, at one point, Johnson had been all in on Aaron Rodgers, but like you said, after the firing of head coach Robert Saleh, he said that this was the most talented roster that he had ever had, but at 2-2, there were reports he had talked about benching Rodgers. So in your reporting, Johnson had wanted to bench him and might not even want to bring him back next year. What changed in their relationship?
I think with Woody Johnson, he's very much about results over process, is what I would say. If he doesn't see the results happening, he wants to make changes. And so, he doesn't have the patience to see things out. And when they're 2-2, I think that's pretty clear that's what happened there. They lose that game to the Broncos. They go 2-2 the next week. They lose to the Vikings. He fires Robert Saleh to give this team a boost, and then he trades for Devontae Adams the week after that. It's just all like thinking in the moment of doing what he thinks is going to help them win. And he thought benching Aaron Rodgers maybe would have provided a boost, and his staff talked him out of it. And then Aaron Rodgers, now he's not playing very well. So if you were going to bench him, now would be the time. But yeah, it is pretty interesting to see the state of the relationship between those two, because when it started out, the Jets gave Aaron Rodgers everything he wanted, and now we're at a state where they're deciding whether they want to bench him.
Yeah, the keys to the city. Now, what does the future hold for Aaron Rodgers in New York?
I don't really think there is much of one as of right now. I mean, things could change, certainly. It's hard to make any declarative statements like this early, but I think that it's more likely that they have a new quarterback next year than that Aaron Rodgers is playing quarterback for them. I think both sides probably want a fresh start.
And speaking of futures, one last question for you. We got to bring it back to the Giants, who lost to the Bucs today with Tommy DeVito starting under center. Now, owner John Mara reportedly wouldn't field any questions when spotted by reporters post-game. What does the future look like for Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll?
I don't think it looks very bright, especially for Daboll. I think, there's reports that he was safe a while back. I think John Mara even said that in a press conference or whatever, and it's just very clear that he spoke way too soon, as they tend to do with these things. And so now you've seen them be an absolute disaster, culminating in one of the worst losses of the last few years for the Giants. So I don't see any way that Daboll survives, and I don't think Joe Schoen should either.
Well, Zach, hopefully you survive this season covering the Jets in New York football. Where can people find your work?
Yeah, all my stories are at The Athletic. You can follow me on Twitter at Zach Blatt, and I have a podcast called Flight Plan where we talk all Jets.
Nice. Thank you so much, Zach. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.